Hey y'all, it's Affliliate Links and I'm back with another video. So this is interesting. This is kind of like a viewer request type of video, which I've never really done outside of like my patron video voting thing. But even then, I come up with the videos and it's voting on the videos. This one is a little different. So I saw that I had a Twitter notification and someone said that they were hoping that I would react to Cosmopolitan's 100 best YA books that everyone should read. Apparently this list came out in January and it kind of flew under the radar for me, and I've been also really busy. So thank you so much to, I can't remember who pointed it out to me, y'all. I will make sure that I put the tweet up here so you can see, because of course I never come anywhere prepared. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Is we're going to be reacting, or you're going to be watching me react to Cosmopolitan's 100 best YA books that everyone should read. So before we get started with the video, I would like to talk a little bit about Book of the Month. So thank you so much to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. If you didn't know, Book of the Month is a super popular and fast growing online book service. Their mission is to promote new and emerging authors and to help readers find books that they're going to love. The way that it works is that the Book of the Month team spends the month searching and vetting through hundreds of books to come up with a specially curated list of newly released and early release titles that readers will have access to. That way they can spend less time researching and more time reading, which I definitely love that. It helps when there's so many books that you do want to read. It's great to have that additional time. And I did say that we do sometimes get access to early release titles, so these titles are not necessarily out yet, but we do have access to them. One of my favorite things about Book of the Month, which I always say, is that Book of the Month offers such a wide variety of books to choose from in terms of their genres. So if you love historical romance, or if you love contemporary romance, you like historical fiction, nonfiction, literary fiction, fantasy, sci-fi, they offer a little bit of everything for people to select from. One thing about Book of the Month too is that they are risk-free. They have a skip policy, so if there's ever a month that you don't see a book that you think that you're going to enjoy, you can skip that month and you won't be charged for it. And of course, Book of the Month has the best prices for newly released hardcovers. I always say that if you use my code Bookishrealm, which will be on the screen, and then the link to the website will be down below in the description box, you can get your first book from Book of the Month for $9.99. If you know anything, newly released hardcovers are super expensive. Like, we're talking anywhere $25 to $30, and if you're balling on a budget, getting your first book for $9.99 is such a great option. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what the selections are for this month. Every month your books are going to come in this blue Book of the Month box, and every month you do get a bookmark. These are really cute, y'all. They're my favorites. This one says, BRB, ignore my responsibilities. That's me. That is me. That's what I always do. I should be doing something else, but instead I'm going to sit down and pick up a book. So I love these bookmarks. They are just amazing. The phrases are hilarious. The first one that I see here is Peach Blossom Spring by Melissa Fu. And this is one that seems to be kind of like one of those family saga historical fiction books. It focuses on a woman who has a great life. She's living in China, years 1938, but the Japanese army is on their way to invade China. So her and her son end up leaving, and then we fast forward to the son re-establishing himself as someone who's completely different, and his daughter is now asking him about his childhood and his past, and he doesn't really tell her because he doesn't want to relive those experiences, but at some point you have to kind of acknowledge where you come from. I'm a huge fan of family sagas, especially those that kind of touch on like historical fiction aspects, like things that really did happen in history. So I think I'm really going to enjoy this one, plus the cover is absolutely beautiful. The next one that I have here is Vladimir by Julia May Jonas, and this is about a couple that works at the same university. It appears to be kind of an age gap thing going on, where we have one professor, the heroine seems to be younger, the hero is older, and they have kind of an understanding, a mutual understanding with a relationship about his extracurricular activities, until he starts getting accused of inappropriate relationships that he's had with his students. So then it makes her extremely uncomfortable, and it goes beyond the understanding that they had. But then she ends up getting involved with a young novelist who is married that comes to the university, and things end up going south. So this sounds like a web of chaos and nonsense and mess, which is right up my alley. The next one that I have here is The Golden Couple. This is the same writing duo that wrote The Wife Between Us, and this one is about a married couple that was doing well, and then they are not. They don't have any intimacy. They're not really the same as they used to be, and the wife ends up having an affair, and she wants to fix the relationship, especially for the sake of their 8-year-old son. So they make the decision to go to therapy, and they see this therapist who apparently has lost her license, but she practices and still wants to help people, but she does so in a very unorthodox way. And when they all get into the room together, clearly there's probably going to be some connections between the three of them, because there's some secrets that have not been revealed yet. And I think this is one of those books where nobody is who you think they are, and there's probably a lot more wild things that are going to happen than what the reader anticipates. This looks like it's going to be a good domestic thriller, and I'm excited to pick it up. The next one that I have here is Don't Cry For Me by Daniel Black, and this one feels like it's going to be an extremely emotional one. It is a father who is a black father who's writing letters to his black gay son, and he has not talked to his son in a very, very long time, because it is implied here that he did not handle the idea of his son coming out very well. And in these letters he talks a lot about his past and their legacy as it relates to their family. He talks about the trauma that his son has inherited, probably being from a black family, and he talks about some things that have happened to him that informed why he did not handle his son coming out very well. And I think that this book really explores the relationship between black fathers and their black gay sons, which is a very interesting conversation that does end up happening in the black community often. So I'm really interested in seeing what Daniel Black does with that conversation in a fictional setting. And the last book that I see for this month's selections is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. This is a fantasy book that takes place on this island where there appears to be a lot of magic. Our two main characters are enemies. They don't get along, but there are girls who end up going missing on the island. So the two of them have to work together in order to uncover what has happened to these girls. And as they work together, they figure out that they actually do make a good pair in terms of like working together and having this friendship. And of course, I'm sure it develops into more, feels like an enemies to lovers trope here. And then they also find out there's a lot more sinister things going on behind the girls that are going missing. So we love a good enemies to lovers trope. I don't know if I've ever read it in a fantasy setting, and it makes me wonder if this is a fantasy romance or just fantasy altogether, but it does sound like it's going to be an interesting book. Which also, those are the selections for this month for Book of the Month. As always, like I say, if you're interested in getting your first book for $9.99, the code is Bookishrealm, and I'll be sure to link to the website down in the description box below. As always, thank you so much to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. Now, historically, when I have done these lists, when Time Magazine did it, when Amazon did it, I hated both lists. Do I think that Cosmopolitan is going to get this right? Absolutely not. I'm expecting to be disappointed, because what ends up happening with these lists is that there's often repeats of authors. There's often a discrepancy in like when people think YA came into existence. And so a lot of early titles that came out like, you know, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s are often left off the list. And also there usually is a lack of diversity. So with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and jump in. I don't have high hopes. I've stopped having high hopes for these lists because I don't know. And yes, I always get the comments, Ashley, when are you going to come up with your own list? I don't know. It will take some time and some diving and some rereading and some really like bracket work and really considering what 100 books I think people should read. Like the best YA books of all time. I came up with I think 30 plus YA books that I think you should read before you die. And those were just some of my favorites that I had read, but it wasn't like the 100 best YA books of all time. To make a list like that is really making a statement, so I want to be very mindful of how I would really construct a list like that. Maybe in a year or two from now, I will come up with my definitive list, but for right now, I think, you know, we'll stick to reacting to people's crap list. All right. So we're going to go ahead and start this process here. All right. So this is the website. And I haven't seen this. I literally just typed it in and clicked on the link literally right before this video. So I have no idea what I'm going to see. But this says 100 best YA books everyone should read regardless of their age. You're literally never too old for these. And this came out January 17th of this year. And I'm not too sure who these creators are. Probably work for Cosmopolitan. But already. Okay, so there's some general information here talking about the early 2000s and yada yada yada. I don't read all of this, and I should probably read all this stuff. All stories about identity, love, friendship, growing up, at universal experience, no matter what age. So they're justifying why I think that they think that these books should be read by everybody regardless of their age. The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, which is, I like The Poet X, but for Elizabeth Acevedo, I don't know if this would be the one that I would choose, because it would be between this and Clap When You Land, to be honest. I think Elizabeth Acevedo definitely deserves to be on this list. I just don't know which book of hers I would choose, but I enjoyed The Poet X. Like a Love Story, I have not read this title. I've seen it tons and tons, and I know that it's gotten a lot of love at my library, but I have not personally read it, so this is one that I probably should read. And it takes place in '89, New York City, follows 3 teens and a closeted Iranian immigrant. That sounds really interesting, and it won the Stonewall Award. Okay, so already off the dome now, I will say that Cosmopolitan is starting off well with, but we're 2 books in, and I feel like I'm about to jinx myself by saying they're starting off well with diversity. I could be jinxing myself. Watch me jinx myself. Okay. Maybe not so far. A Very Large Expanse of Tahira Mafi. Okay, y'all, interesting enough, I have never read a Tahira Mafi book, ever. Like, I'm thinking. Unless Tahira Mafi was a part of a short story type of collection, I don't think I've read any of her standalone things. But I've heard a lot of good things about A Very Large Expanse of the Sea, but I have not read that. So I'm not going to make commentary on that. But I do like The Wide Range. It's kind of a funny story by Ned Fazzini. Okay, so I like this book. And this is one of those earlier books with mental health representation. It's been a while since I've read this book, so I don't know if it's great mental health representation, but it's kind of sad because Ned Fazzini did end up committing suicide not too long, I believe, after this book was published. So it's kind of a tough thing to look at this book, but it's been years since I've read it, but I don't know if I put it on top 100. I'd have to think about the rep in this one, whether it's still good. I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. That's a good show. All right, hold up now. Cosmopolitan might be doing a thing, because that's a good. Darius the Great Is Not Okay. All right. Okay. Listen. Now, once again, we'll see as we go through. They're skewing a little bit newer. A lot of these titles have been published within the last, I would say, 5 to 8 years. So, because I can't remember when It's Kind of a Funny Story was published. That could be 10 years old, but so far it's still skewing new. But there's some good selections on here. So I have not read Darius the Great Is Not Okay. I do own that book. It is on my shelf, and I need to get to it because there are a lot of individuals who speak highly of it. Beast of Prey. Okay, so somebody on Cosmopolitan that may know what they're doing. Let me find out that they know. Okay, so we always have the obligatory either Laini Taylor book. So let's go ahead and put this out there. There's always going to be Laini Taylor always going to be Cassandra Clare, Leigh Bardugo, Sarah J Maas. I feel like those are like obligatory, like people do often feel like they should be. Now, I read Daughter of Smoke and Bone. It was not memorable to me. It wasn't the best thing. So I mean, but I'm really inserting my personal feelings. I don't know what impact this trilogy has had on shaping YA, because I didn't finish the trilogy. I do know that it got a lot of hype on BookTube, but past that, I don't know if I would include that on the list. We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutchinson. This also was one that got a lot of play on BookTube at one time, but I was never interested in reading it. Once again, we are still skewing new. Do not kill me, y'all. I am going to move through this fast, because if I make a lot of commentary, we're going to be here for a very, very long time. Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, that also got a lot of play on BookTube. Like, we're talking like BookTube 2013, 2015 era, somewhere in there. I have not read that. I still have no interest in reading that. We're still skewing super new. That's the reaction that I'm getting. They are picking a wide range in terms of, like, if we're looking for rep, they're doing good. But in terms of like range, not so much. Like time frame. Sadie by Courtney Summers. I've heard a lot about Sadie, and a lot of people enjoy Sadie. A lot of people enjoy Courtney Summers. I don't think I've ever read a Courtney Summers book, but yes, I don't know if I would put Courtney Summers on there. Home is Not a Country. Okay. All right. Now, once again, here we are centering a lot of trauma as well, because I feel like everything has dealt with some type of oppressive situation. So that's also a thing to kind of look out for in some of these lists. Last Night at the Telegraph. I'm not surprised to see this. If y'all did not know, Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe cleaned out at the Youth Media Awards this year. I mean, this book racked up a lot of awards. So, I mean, rightfully so, but it's racked up a lot of awards. Still new. We're still looking very, very new. When the Moon Was Ours by Anna Marie McLemore. I don't think I've read a book by Anna Marie McLemore just yet. I know they write a lot of books that have a magical realism feel to them, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't know what book, because I own several of their books, but I don't know what book I would put on this list if I was to choose them. And that's a different cover. I've never seen that cover of it. Still nice in terms of rep, but still new. Still skewing very new. Ember in the Ashes, Saba Tahir. I'm never surprised to see this on this list. I hated this book. Like Saba Tahir, just don't like this book. And I think that it is one that I do. I would put, even with my, because I'm sitting here fumbling over words, even with my personal feelings about An Ember in the Ashes, I think that it would be one that I would put on a list. And I think how I would look at this list is going to be very different from, like, when I say best of. I think I would be looking at the books that have really shaped YA, shape certain eras of YA. So you may see something like Cassandra Clare on a list that I would create, even if I'm not a super fan of her work. You know, I own a lot of her stuff, but I'm not like dying like the next time the next Cassandra Clare book comes out, I feel like I must, you know, I must put her. But I think if I look through it on that lens, there may be books and authors on there that I may not enjoy, but if I'm looking at it in terms of shaping YA, they would need to be on that list. But I definitely understand The Taking of Jake. Yeah, this is super new. Okay, now here's a question that I have too. Are we being mindful of our rep, or are we checkboxing? Because that could be dangerous. You run a fine line with making sure that your lists are inclusive, but also not checkboxing and just including a book because it's diverse. I would not, as much as I did enjoy The Taking of Jake Livingston, I don't know if this would be the 100 best YA books that everyone needs to read regardless of their age. I don't know if I would put this one on there. It's good, but at that title, I don't know. I don't know if I put that on there. Okay, Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. Regardless of the popularity, I still wouldn't put her on the list. I wouldn't put her on the list. The Girls I've Been by Tess Sharp. Okay, I've heard of Tess Sharp, but I haven't read anything by Tess Sharp. Okay, so this is going to be the issue with this list that I'm going to have. It's too new. It's way too new. We Are Not Free by Tracy Chee is one that I said that I wanted to read this year because I own it and I have not had the opportunity to read it yet. But this one that I will be getting to. Tweet Cute by Emma Lord. I wouldn't include it on the list, to be honest with you. Not one that I would think of. Okay, here's one that I've never heard of before. American Betia. Please correct me if I say that wrong. I've never heard of this one. That's interesting. That's a new one that I've never heard of. Here we go. Obligatory Leigh Bardugo, Shadow and Bone, of course. We know that's going to be on the list. We're waiting for Cassie Clare and what's her face, Sarah J. Maas. They have to show up. The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. I don't know if I would put it on the list, to be honest with you. I've seen Nicola Yoon multiple times on one list, and it's just not. I would include Pet by Akwaeke Emeze. I love that book. I think it is one that everybody should read, regardless of age. Definitely a short book that I think packs a heck of a punch. Star Daughter. Okay, so here we are with this list. I think that Cosmopolitan had the right idea. I think they were going for, diverse titles. That's clear that they were going for diversity in their list, which there's nothing wrong with that. I think that you have to acknowledge that publishing in the past hasn't always been super diverse. It does not mean that some of those books that were published 20 years ago were not worth putting on here. So, and you did have diverse writers back then. They just weren't getting the market that they're getting right now. So when I think of, authors who were doing stuff like that, Walter Dean Myers, Sharon Draper, they were writing teen books in the 90s that showed diverse experiences of BIPOC communities. And to think that this whole idea of diversity only existing in the past 5 to 6 years of publishing is not true. Yes, it was fewer, but it did happen. They just weren't getting the marketing that they deserved, which they come off as obscure. They're not really obscure titles if you think about it. So it's kind of hard with this one. And in the front, heck no, y'all. I like that. It's, cheesy YA contemporary romance, but yeah, no. I would put a Jason Reynolds on this list. What Jason Reynolds book? I don't know, because he has such a huge bibliography. Long Way Down is definitely one of my favorites by him. I don't know if that would be the one that I would select if I ended up reading his entire bibliography. That's just me being honest, but I would include a Jason Reynolds book. A.S. King, yeah, I would put an A.S. King book on that list. Don't know which one. I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver. I haven't read this one, but I've heard a lot of good things about this one. I still feel like, man, y'all. So they're doing better on the representation side, but not the time side. And a lot of these books are like struggle books. So Black Girl Unlimited by Echo Brown. I definitely would think about this one. I haven't read Black Girl Unlimited, but I've heard great things about it. Man, oh man, oh man. The Downstairs Girl by Stacey Lee. Stacey Lee has done a lot of great things with historical fiction, but writing it from the perspective of like having Asian representation in it. And so, but once again, going back to, is it material that's, when we're talking 100 best books of all time, is it a title? I think that's something to consider. In this list, I could see if someone was to say to me, Ashley, I feel like this list is a bunch of tokenizing going on because they know that diversity is the buzzword and that they need to include diverse titles and not really think about the quality of the book you know, just because it's diverse does not make it a good book type of situation. I can respect someone who would have that opinion. They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. I don't know if I would put that on there. Like, When Dimple Met Rishi, I would, because of the shifting and the way that this entire, because I believe that this is a series. Somebody correct me, but I'm pretty sure it's a series. I would put this on here in terms of what it shaped and done. It's been years since I read When Dimple Met Rishi, but I really, really did enjoy it. The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert, absolutely not. That book is so dry. This Is My America by Kim Johnson. Trauma book. One of my favorites, but very, very trauma based. So that's, you know, Marie Lu. Yeah. I listened to Marie Lu talk a little bit about her experience in coding her characters as white because she was afraid of having an Asian character in her books because she didn't know how publishing would receive it. And it was a very interesting conversation to listen to her have, but I would put Marie Lu on there. If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo, I think I would include that one. I'm surprised this is the one that they chose by E. Lockhart and not the other book with the family issues, whatever, We Were Liars. I'm surprised that they chose this one. This one is a little, I believe that this one is a little bit older, but this, still, y'all, it's not going further enough back. Wilder Girls, no. no. Firekeeper's Daughter, yes. I would include that on a list. Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson, I don't know if I would include that one. Out of what I've read by Tiffany D. Jackson, I don't know if I would include Grown. If Grown would be my choice. I think a lot of people would probably say if you're going to put Tiffany D. Jackson on that, a lot of people would go with Allegedly or Monday's Not Coming to be on this list. And a lot of these books, once again, let's be honest, a lot of these books are books that have a lot of traction, a lot of popularity. We're not seeing a lot of books that didn't get as much buzz, or maybe have a smaller readership, or maybe are coming from a smaller press. So while there are good things that are happening with this list, I think this list definitely is doing some things that I think are better than what I've seen with Amazon and with what was the other one, Time. But I think that where it's failing is definitely in watching what years they're picking from, like their wide range of years, and then also not acknowledging books that don't have as much of a wide readership. Don't Ask Me Where I'm From. It's one that I've tried listening to twice before and I couldn't really get into it. And once again, we're looking at a book that definitely is more about trauma. So we haven't really seen a lot of incidental when it comes to BIPOC communities in these books. There's not a lot of incidental. When I say incidental, I mean like just doing your average normal teenage thing, which it's a lot of discussion that's going on about that right now, a lot of good conversation that's going on about that, things that I had to acknowledge because I'm down to read a hard-hitting contemporary book. Y'all know that's me, but also realizing that in reading those, I do need to take the opportunity to acknowledge those books that do show incidental things, BIPOC communities just doing whatever, or even in the queer community, it doesn't have to always be a coming out story or the hardships of coming out. So Girl Serpent Thorn, no the black, definitely not. I did not really care for the Black Kids. It was a huge disappointment for me. I think a lot of people like the Black Kids because it came out in 2020, not too long after the murder of George Floyd, and this book did well, I think, because of that. And it's interesting because it does take the Rodney King riots as a historical event, which is crazy that's historical fiction now, but I did not like the character development or the storytelling of this book at all. It was not a favorite. The Astonishing Color of After by Emily X.R. Pan is an absolute yes. I just want to say that. Absolute yes. Absolute yes. It's not written like any YA book that I've ever read before. And it's one that a lot of people do not acknowledge. And Emily X.R. Pan is a fabulous writer. So I think this still came from Little Brown Books for Young Readers. It still came from a major publisher, but I don't think it got as much buzz meaning that I think people were talking about it, but nobody ever read it. It was an excellent book. Nina LaCour. I think Nina LaCour has done a lot shaping YA, so I could understand why Nina LaCour would be on this list. I don't know if that's a particular book that people would pick. They Wish They Were Us by Jessica Goodman. I mean, no. Radio Silence, I would have to read that one because I've heard some interesting things about Radio Silence and I need to pick that one up. I have yet to pick it up. Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. We all know that Benjamin is just not, it's not a great person because he's said some really not so great things about the trans community, I believe. This book has done a lot. This book, you can tell from like librarianship wise, this book has done a lot. And it is one that I know I love this book. It's one of those things where you're so torn because it's a book that you loved and then the author does some really just wild stuff. It's aggravating, but I do understand why it's here. I really do, to be honest. Another one. Sherman Alexie has done some not great things, but this book has done some interesting things in terms of YA, and this is where, you know, separating the art from the artist becomes a very interesting conversation to have amongst ourselves. Not So Pure and Simple, but okay, so the reason why I would include this book on this list and why I'm glad that they selected this book, Not So Pure and Simple, one, in terms of like thinking about booktube community, is not a book that got a lot of buzz. I don't really know a lot of people who read Not So Pure and Simple. It is a book that focuses on a black boy, a black teen boy as a main character, which we don't necessarily always get a lot of those. And then it addresses toxic masculinity in a very interesting way. I really enjoyed my read of Not So Pure and Simple, and I cannot wait to read more from Lamar. It's great. Furia, which I have not read at all, but I think that this one, a lot of people have loved it. From some of this stuff, y'all, I'm very familiar with because of librarianship, not because of booktube, because some of this stuff it's kind of like flown out of booktube's radar. Furia is one of those titles I think that kind of like flew out of booktube's radar, but it was huge before it was Reese's YA book club pick. It was a big title in the library system, and I have not read it yet, so I'll give you The Sun by Jandy Nelson. Once again, this was kind of like a popular book in the booktube sphere. We're still skewing a little too new. Red, White, and Royal Blue. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but Red, White, and Royal Blue is not YA, correct? I mean, I know in libraries, like, we don't classify that as YA. That's an adult romance. That's interesting. Children of Blood and Bone. This is another obligatory title. I have my personal feelings. I really enjoyed Children of Blood and Bone, but I think that Tomi Adeyemi just crashed and burned with the second book. And personally, I'm not a huge fan of hers right now, but I mean, I get it. I mean, I think there are better black YA fantasy books out now. Every Day by David Levithan. I think David Levithan probably would be, like, if I had to create a list, I would put him on the list, but I don't know what book I would choose by David Levithan. It's interesting that they choose, you know, Every Day, and I wonder if they chose it because of the movie. A Song Below Water. I'm not a huge fan of Bethany C. Morrow's writing style. I think I have learned I think her writing style and I are just not compatible, because I have read 2 books from her now and they're not bad books, but the writing style and we just don't click. And I don't think that I would put A Song Below Water on here. I don't know. David Yoon, Frankly in Love. I don't think I would put them. If I say by Gail Forman, I would. Believe it or not, it was a different era, and yeah, I can see why I know it's crazy to say, but I can definitely see why it's on there. One of Us is Lying. Once again, I mean, I've read everything that Karen McManus has published, y'all. Everything that she has published, I have read. And I think she does some interesting things because you don't find a lot of, well, in the past, you wouldn't have found a lot of really great YA thrillers and mysteries. I mean, they existed, but I think that it was kind of an underrepresented genre in YA. But I think Karen McManus kind of changed that scope a little bit, and you have Tiffany D. Jackson changing that scope as well. But I wonder if this was put on the list because this has been big on Book Talk, you know? Okay, scrolling down. If You Could Be Mine. This is one that I have not heard of. It looks older by the cover, but I can't really comment. I haven't heard of that one. That's interesting. A Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow. Heard great things about that. Don't know if I would include it on the list. Calling My Name by Liara Tamani. I have heard great things about this book, and I think that this one is just simply coming of age. I have not read this one either, but this one is more coming of age. I don't think it focuses too much on any, like, you know, tough topics like racial injustice. Codename Verity by Elizabeth Warren. Yeah, in terms of historical fiction, okay, so I always have like a thing with this where they include this book but they don't include anything by Ruta Sepetys, and I think that Ruta Sepetys definitely should always be on the list because she writes YA historical fiction from a perspective that is usually not given in YA historical fiction. Like the book that she had, that just by the time this goes up, this book would have come out the week prior to this video coming out. She just wrote a book about the fight against communism in Romania in 1989. Anytime we think about like YA historical fiction, a lot of them cover like World War II, but there's always from the perspective of the Allies. Like she did Salt to the Sea, which is from the perspective of Lithuania. Like stuff like that. I always feel like she should be on the list, but I feel like they always battle between those two. The Henna Wars, which I've heard great things about the Henna Wars. Not surprised to see Dear Martin on this list. We're probably also going to see Angie Thomas because people don't make these lists without including the two of them. I always tell people that Angie Thomas and Nick Stone were not the first authors to address police brutality. There were books that came out before them. As much as I have enjoyed them in the past, I do recognize that there were other books that did come out before. Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging. This is an older title. I will say that. I haven't read it. Some people love it. I think it's pretty problematic if you read it now. But not surprised to see it. Felix Ever After. Yeah, I think they picked the most diverse titles that have been published within the last 3 to 4 years and put them on this list. The Lovely Bones, well, we know the controversy that's going on there. There's a lot going on with Miss Alice. It's a whole lot going on with Miss Alice. Love Letters to the Dead. You know, this was a huge one a long time ago when it came out. BookTube was really, really into Love Letters to the Dead. Would I include it on the list? Probably not. But it was popular. A Song of Race and Ruins. Yeah, okay. So here we go. There's a difference between making sure that you have adequate representation in a list and just dumping every oh, man. It's not that these are not good, because this is the most, I think, when I think about representation, I think this is, they have put the most thought into it, but it can also be perceived as, we just pick the most diverse titles that came out in the past 3 to 4 years and put them on the list to make sure that we have diverse representation. Because like I said before, it existed prior to the past 5 years of publishing. You Should See Me on the Crown, and these are all very, very, very popular books. Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda. I'm torn on this. I was not a fan of this. Like, I think when I read it, I gave it, and this was years ago, I think I gave it 3 stars when I read it. I was not a huge fan of Simon, so my bias may come into that. Like I said, we were going to see The Hate U Give. Like, that's without fail. We were going to see. Here we go. This is the oldest title that they have, which makes sense because The Outsiders was published in the 60s, and it is often coined as the first YA book. There were kind of sort of YA books that existed before, but this was a game changer. As much as I think S.E. Hinton can go crawl into a hole because of the comment that she made about what did she say, that graphic novels are not real reading. Like, stay off of Twitter. Like, stay off of Twitter. She made that comment and I was like, ugh. But yeah, yeah, that definitely would be on my list as well. Little and Lion by Brandy Colbert. I think Brandy Colbert should be on this list. There's a lot of people who often leave Brandy Colbert out of the discussions when we come to YA books. Don't know why. Girl in Pieces. No. The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. I would include it. I would. Although it is YA historical fiction told from the typical perspective. I want to say typical perspective, but at the same time, it's not. And that's all I'm going to say. If you know, then you know. The Field Guide to the North American Teenager. Yeah, we definitely just went through, and whatever diverse books came out in the past 3 to 5 years, we just put them on here. Surprised to see Saving Savannah on this list. Very surprised. That was a good selection. That's definitely under the radar type of list. By Days by Jeff Zentner. I don't know much about this one. No. The Hunger Games. Yeah. That dystopian wave. Yeah. I can see that. Never Look Back by Lillian Rivera. It's okay. So let me go ahead and say this. It's not that these books are not good. It's not. But if we're selecting most books from, like, I would say a 5 to 6 year radius, a lot of these were just published in the past 2 to 3 years, to be honest with you. And we're going through and we Google diverse books published in 2019, 2020, 2021. This is what you would get. And I don't know how much we're looking at quality of the story, because diversity does not automatically make a story good. I hope that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? Well, here goes another good one. Forever by Judy Blume. This is an older title. I think in this list I was just looking for a little bit more range in publication, years of publication. Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. I would never put Rainbow Rowell on the list, ever. I think I say that every time I see her pop up. The Way I Used to Be by Amber Smith. It's a pretty intense book, but see, I wonder they included this one, and I can't remember when this one was published, but I would put Speak on the list before this one. If I had to choose, I would choose Speak by Lori Halse Anderson, which I don't know. I love American Street, but we're talking 100 books, y'all. Like, literally, we're talking 100 books. Now, we're just talking about favorites, and I could give you a list of 300 to 500 books. Like, American Street would be on there. But if we're talking 100 books, it's a very, very selective list. It's very, they did include Speak. Happy to see that. But American Street is wonderful. It's wonderful. I love it. Top 100, if I'm looking at a massive range of publication, we're looking at small press in addition to big press. Like, that's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of books to choose from, and narrowing it down to 100, you've got to be stupid selective. But Speak would be on my list for sure. Speak would definitely be on my list. The Gravity of Us. I don't know. The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. Okay, I don't know if I would choose A Fault in Our Stars, but I would put a John Green book on there. Believe it or not. Like, I think I've read most of John Green's books. How I Live Now. So this is an older title, and this one does have to do, I would classify it as historical fiction. I just feel like there's other historical fiction books in YA that are better. Like, you know, it is an older title though. I would say that. Noughts and Crosses is one that I think it holds true to what it did. This one was published, I think, in early 2000s. Let's see what it says here. Released in 2001. Yeah, I do agree with this statement. Released in 2001, the book remains completely timely and thought-provoking. I would agree. Dread Nation by Justina Ireland, I wouldn't put it on the list. And I was kind of middle of the road with that one, but Perks of Being a Wallflower, I would put that on the list. All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. If we're talking about mental health representation, I don't know. To All the Boys I Loved Before, yes, I would put that on the list for me. Piecing Me Together by Renee Watson. I'm gonna read this one this year, so I don't know what to say to that one just yet, because I do plan on reading that one this year. The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, that's a tough one. I could see both yes and no to that one as well. I could see that. 5 feet, no. No, absolutely not. All right, y'all, so that was Cosmopolitan's 100, and so my whole thing about it is that I feel like they didn't choose from a broad range in terms of like years of publication. They had a couple of older titles on there, some in the early 2000s. They did have Forever on there, which I think that Forever by Judy Blume should be a staple on everyone's list. List really is not legit if I don't see Forever or like The Outsiders. I think that they did better in terms of diversity and looking at representation. However, I do think that it comes across as I Googled diverse books of 2020, 2021, 2019, 2018, and we put them on a list because their diverse titles skew within the last 2 to 3 years of publication, and there were diverse titles that were coming out 15, 20 years ago, but they're not going to be as popular. And that was another thing, is that a lot of these books were coming from major presses and not smaller, independent type of places where you probably were going to find books that were just as great, if not better. And I always think about like the writers that they left out, like 90s writers, and my go-tos are always going to be Walter D. Myers and Sharon Draper, because they've been doing it for so long. And there are a lot more, but I know that they just kind of get left out of these lists because I don't think people understand really the full scope of YA and how long YA technically has been around, in that we're living through what is kind of like a rebirth of YA, which started with the golden age in the early 2000s with like Harry Potter and Twilight. Like that was kind of a rebirthing, but it existed prior to that era, and not in the same capacity, but it did exist. So you can't forget about those titles that existed pre-2000 in favor of those that exist post-2000. And you can't just select your diverse titles from books that have been published in the last 3 to 4 years, because it's not a true scope of what the age category of YA is. So I mean, it's not a bad list, it's a good list of books. But I think I go into these lists with a different perspective, and maybe I'm going in with an intention that they may not have had, where whenever they're thinking of books, they're just like, these books are really, really good. Like, I'm not thinking about what has shaped the age category of YA historically, what has been done with publishing, and why they may not be thinking of those components. So I could be, and I just thought about this when I went through this list, is I could be looking at this through a completely different lens than the intention of the creators of the list. So do I think they got it right? From my lens, not really, but also they got some stuff right that I like. There were some titles on there that I think that I don't know if I would say they were better than Amazon or Time, because they're better in certain ways, but they failed in other ways. Like Time definitely did a better kind of like shifting through the ages, like when I say ages, I mean like time, like books published in 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. I think that this one did not, but I think that they were trying to incorporate diversity more than any other list. Amazon's list was just trash. So, but we're not surprised by that. So I don't know. I'm not sure, y'all. Not sure how I feel. That's an interesting one for me to kind of sit on and think about. But yeah, let me know how you feel about the list in the comments down below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Click the subscribe button if you want to see more content. As always, if you're looking to follow me on social media, or you're looking for ways to support the channel, all the links will be down in the description box below. And I'll be back with another video soon.